The moon hung low over the Sonoran Desert, casting silver light across creosote brush and ancient saguaro. The temperature had dropped 30 degrees since sundown, but the three riders moving through the darkness barely noticed the cold. They had torches, they had rifles, they had a purpose that burned hotter than any Arizona night could cool. And they had their prey in sight. Desba ran barefoot through the thorned scrub, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The child in her arms weighed nothing and everything. Ashki, 7 years old, silent as the grave for 16 months, now clung to her neck with hands that trembled. His eyes, wide and dark in the moonlight, stared at nothing, seeing everything, seeing too much. Behind them, hoofbeats thundered. Men shouted. A rifle cracked the bullet, whining past Desba's ear, close enough that she felt the displaced air. She stumbled over a root hidden in shadow, nearly went down, caught herself with one hand against rough stone. The impact sent pain lancing up her arm. She didn't slow. "Ashki," she gasped in Apache, the old tongue her grandmother had taught her, the language that was dying as surely as her people were dying. "We don't stop. You hear me? Don't stop." The boy said nothing. He hadn't spoken since the day he watched his father die. Hadn't cried, hadn't screamed. Just that terrible, endless silence that wrapped around him like a shroud. 2 hours earlier, everything had been different outside Agent Bartholomew's office at San Carlos Reservation, waiting with the patience her people had learned across generations of waiting. Waiting for rations, waiting for justice, waiting for promises that never came. Through the thin wooden walls, she heard voices raised in anger. "I won't sign over water rights," Agent Bartholomew's voice firm despite his fear. "That's tribal land, the only clean water source for 30 miles. You're asking me to condemn these people to death." "I'm asking you to be reasonable." The second voice was cold, controlled. Jacob Flynn. Desba knew the name. Everyone on the reservation knew the name. Outlaw. Silver prospector. A man who took what he wanted and called it progress. "There's silver in those hills. Water makes mining possible." Simple economics. Simple murder, you mean? Strong words from a man in a very weak position. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the desert quiet. Desba pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. Through the window she saw Agent Bartholomew fall, saw the blood, saw Jacob Flynn standing over the body, a smoking pistol in his hand, saw 2 other men with him, their faces hard and empty. And then Flynn's eyes swept the yard and found what Desba had forgotten in her shock. Ashki. The boy had been playing near the rain barrel, making patterns in the dust with a stick. Now he stood frozen, the stick still in his hand, staring at the office window, at the dead man, at the killer. Their eyes met across 30 feet of darkening desert air. Flynn's face changed. Recognition, calculation, decision. There, the kid saw. Desba moved without thought. She grabbed Ashki, lifting him despite his weight, and ran. Behind her, men shouted. Boots pounded. The chase began. Now Desba's strength was failing. Her feet, cut and bleeding from the rocks and thorns, could barely hold her weight. Ashki had grown heavy as stone. The riders behind were gaining, their horses fresh, their determination absolute. No witnesses. That was the rule men like Flynn lived by. Desba saw a cluster of boulders ahead, and changed direction, hoping for cover, hoping for anything. Her foot caught on something unseen. This time she went down hard, Ashki tumbling from her arms. She crawled to him, covered his body with her own, waiting for the bullet that would end this. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. The lead rider was laughing. Then a rifle cracked from a different direction entirely. The sound was sharp, precise, nothing like the wild shooting of Flynn's men. One of the riders jerked and fell from his saddle, hitting the ground in a cloud of dust. The other 2 wheeled their horses in confusion, searching the darkness for this new threat. Federal land. The voice came from shadows to the north, calm and steady as a preacher reading scripture. "You're trespassing. Leave now." "This ain't your business, whoever you are." The lead rider. A man named Calhoun, who Desba recognized from town, raised his rifle toward the voice. Another shot. Calhoun's hat flew from his head, spinning away into the night. "It is now. Go." Calhoun and the third rider looked at each other, looked at their fallen companion who was groaning and clutching his shoulder, looked at the darkness where death spoke with such quiet certainty. They turned and rode back the way they'd come, taking their wounded with them. Silence fell over the desert. Desba lay over Ashki, not moving, not trusting this rescue, not trusting anything anymore. The boy beneath her was rigid as wood, his breathing shallow and fast. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate, not trying to hide. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, lean, moving with the controlled precision of a man who'd spent years learning how to survive. He carried a rifle in one hand, lowered but ready. In the moonlight, Desba could see weathered features, a scar across his jaw, eyes that held something old and tired and unbreakable. He stopped 15 feet away, made no move to come closer. "You hurt," his voice matched his face, worn smooth by time and pain. Desba pushed herself up to her knees, pulling Ashki against her. Her right hand found the knife she'd taken from Bartholomew's desk as she'd fled. She held it where he could see it. A warning. "Stay back." The man studied her. His eyes moved from her face to the boy, to the blood on her dress that wasn't hers, to her bare and bleeding feet. Reading a story written in dust and fear. He spoke again, this time in Apache. The words were heavily accented, grammatically imperfect, but recognizable. A white man who'd learned the old tongue. "I help, no hurt." Desba stared. In 16 years of life on the reservation, in 28 years of being Apache in white man's territory, she'd never heard one of them speak her language. Not the agents, not the soldiers, not the missionaries who came to save her soul while ignoring her hunger. "Who are you?" He switched back to English. "Name's Garrett Walsh. I've got a ranch about a mile north. You need shelter. The boy needs rest. And those men will be back with more help once they patch up their wounded." "Why help us?" Something moved across his face, old pain carefully contained. "I don't have a good answer for that." He turned and walked back into the darkness. For a moment, Desba thought he was leaving them. Then she heard the soft nicker of a horse. He returned leading a Palomino mare, her coat the color of desert sand in sunlight. "Can you ride?" Desba didn't answer, didn't move. Garrett nodded slowly, understanding her distrust, respecting it. He tied the mare to a mesquite branch within Desba's reach. Then he stepped back, way back. 30 feet at least. "Follow the wash north. You'll see my buildings. Stone house can't miss it. Barn's got hay and water. Door's unlocked. I'll walk. Give you time to decide if you trust me." He started walking, north, not looking back. Desba stayed where she was, breathing hard, her mind racing. Ashki stirred against her, and she looked down at his face. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching Garrett's retreating figure with an expression she hadn't seen in 16 months. Curiosity. That decided her. She stood lifting Ashki and approached the mare. The horse stood calm, well-trained, patient. Desba pulled herself into the saddle, settled Ashki in front of her, and followed the white man north through the desert night. She didn't trust him, but she had no other choice. And sometimes in this brutal world, those were the only options you got. The ranch appeared as the moon began its descent toward the western horizon. Garrett hadn't lied. The main house was built of stone, unusual for this territory, where most settlers used adobe or wood. It sat solid and permanent against the desert, flanked by corrals and a barn that looked well-maintained despite obvious age. One horse. Desba noticed immediately. A ranch this size should have multiple horses, hired hands activity. But she saw only Garrett's Palomino and the mare she rode, only one man's boot prints in the dust. He lived alone. That information filed itself away in the part of her mind that cataloged survival data. Alone meant vulnerable. Alone meant desperate. Alone meant dangerous in different ways than a crowd. Garrett reached the barn ahead of her and opened the wide doors. Lamplight spilled out warm and golden. He'd lit it before leaving to patrol his land, before finding her running for her life. "Inside safe," he said. "I'll bring blankets, food, water." Desba dismounted, keeping Ashki close. The boy's weight against her side was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to smoke and blood. "I sleep here." Garrett continued, gesturing to the barn. "House is there if you want it, but I'm thinking you'll feel safer in here. More exits." He was right. The barn had 3 ways out, the house only 2. "I'll be in the main building if you need anything. Knock if you do. Won't come to the barn unless you ask." He left, simply turned and walked away across the yard, up the steps, into the stone house. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Desba stood in the barn doorway, every muscle tense, waiting for the trap to spring, waiting for him to come back with rope or chains or whatever method white men used to claim Apache women in this territory where law was a word without meaning. He didn't come back. Minutes passed, then an hour. The eastern sky began to pale from black to gray. Somewhere a rooster crowed. The desert night sounds faded, replaced by the stirring of day. Ashke's weight grew heavier in her arms. She looked down and saw his eyes finally closing, exhaustion claiming him. She carried him deeper into the barn, found a pile of fresh hay in one corner, and laid him down gently. He curled onto his side without waking his breathing, evening out into sleep. Desba sat beside him, her back against the wall, the knife across her knees. She could see the house from here, could see both barn entrances, could see anyone approaching long before they reached her. She wouldn't sleep. Couldn't afford to. Not here in this strange place with this strange man who spoke broken Apache and offered help without asking for payment. Nothing was free. Everything had a price. She'd learned that lesson early and learned it well. Her eyes drifted to the house. A lamp moved behind one window. She could see Garrett's silhouette, tall and still standing, as if looking out at the barn, looking at her. Then the lamp moved away and darkness returned to the window. Desba's fingers tightened on the knife handle. She would stay awake. She would watch. She would protect her son. But the night had been long. The fear had been enormous. The exhaustion was absolute. Her eyes closed, just for a moment, just to rest them. When she opened them again, the sun was fully up, and something had changed. She jerked awake, heart-pounding, instantly alert. Ashke still slept beside her, undisturbed. The barn was quiet. Everything looked the same as when she'd closed her eyes, except the basket sitting 6 feet away. A woven basket, Apache design, filled with food, dried meat, cornmeal, hard biscuits, a jar of honey, a canteen of water condensation beating on its metal surface. Fresh, cold. Desba stared at it. She hadn't heard anyone approach, hadn't woken when Garrett entered the barn. He'd moved with the silence of a hunter, placed the basket within her reach, but not close enough to threaten, and left without disturbing her. The implications unfolded in her mind like a map. He could have done anything while she slept. Could have taken Ashke, could have tied her, could have claimed what men always claimed from women who had no power to refuse. He'd left food. Desba crawled forward and examined the basket. No tricks that she could see, just food honestly offered. She opened the canteen and sniffed. Water, nothing more. Touched the honey jar and found it sealed untampered. She drank. The water was cold and clean, tasting of the deep earth. She took the dried meat and chewed slowly, her body crying out for nourishment after 2 days of running with nothing but fear in her belly. Ashke woke and watched her eat. She held out a piece of meat to him. He took it with trembling fingers and brought it to his mouth, chewed, swallowed. His eyes never left her face. "We're safe," she told him in Apache, willing it to be true. For now. Through the barn door she could see Garrett working in the corral. He had a bay horse on a lead line, walking it in slow circles, talking to it in that low, steady voice she'd heard in the desert. Too far to make out words, but the tone was gentle, patient. The horse's ears were forward, relaxed, trusting. Desba watched him work. His movements were economical, purposeful, no wasted motion. The bearing of a man who'd been trained to efficiency and never forgotten the lessons. Former military, she guessed. The way he held himself, the precision of his shooting in the dark, the discipline in his solitude. A soldier who'd left soldiering behind. She wondered why. The day passed in careful observation. Garrett worked around the ranch, maintaining fences, tending his small garden, repairing a section of corral that had weathered poorly. He came near the barn twice. Both times he announced himself before approaching. Both times he left supplies without entering. Water, fresh bread, a bar of soap, a worn but clean shirt that would fit Ashke. He never asked for thanks, never asked for explanations, never asked for anything at all. Desba found herself watching him more than watching for threats. Studying the way he moved, the way he spoke to his animals with more warmth than he showed to himself. The way he flinched at sudden sounds, old reflexes never quite buried. A haunted man. She recognized the signs because she wore them herself. Evening came. Garrett lit lamps in the house. Desba saw him move past windows, settling into whatever routine governed his solitary life. The barn grew dark around her. She lit no lamp of her own, preferring shadows, preferring concealment. Ashki sat beside her, awake now, watching the house with that same strange curiosity. His small hand found hers in the darkness, still silent, still locked away inside himself, but present, aware. She squeezed his hand gently. "Tomorrow we'll see." But the words felt hollow. See what? How long could they stay here? Flynn knew she'd run north. Knew this was the last ranch before the Badlands. Would come looking eventually with more men, more guns, more determination. And when he came, what then? Desba had no answer. No plan beyond surviving this moment, then the next, then the one after. The way her people had survived for generations. One breath at a time. She slept lightly that night, waking at every sound. The cry of a coyote, the rustle of wind through dry grass, the distant call of an owl hunting. Desert sounds familiar and strange all at once. In the morning, when she woke, another basket waited, and beside it, something new, a small bundle of cloth. Inside, a jar of salve and strips of clean bandage. She looked down at her feet, torn and bleeding from the run through the desert, looked at the medicine, looked across at the house where Garrett moved behind curtained windows. He'd noticed, and offered healing without forcing it. Desba opened the salve. It smelled of herbs she recognized, comfrey, calendula, Apache medicines that grew wild in the desert if you knew where to look. He'd made this himself, or bought it from someone who knew the old ways. She spread it on her wounds, wrapped them in the bandages. The pain eased. Not much, but enough. Ashki watched her. Then he did something he hadn't done in 16 months. He smiled, barely. A ghost of the expression, but real. Progress, Desba thought. Small, fragile, but real. The morning of the third day brought change. Ashki was fevered. Not dangerously so, not yet, but his forehead burned under Desba's hand, and his breathing had gone shallow and quick. Stress, dehydration. The trauma of what he'd witnessed catching up to his small body. Desba knew herbs, knew healing, but she had nothing here. No medicine bag, no supplies. Just what Garrett left in his baskets. She made her decision quickly, rose, walked across the yard to the house, knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately. Garrett stood there, his face carefully neutral, his eyes taking in her expression and reading the emergency. "My son, sick, medicine." Garrett didn't hesitate. He turned and walked to a cabinet, opened it. Inside, Desba saw rows of bottles and jars. Quinine, willow bark, laudanum for pain, herbs dried and labeled. A frontier pharmacy carefully maintained. He selected quinine and willow bark, brought them to her, placed them on the table between them, not in her hands, giving her the choice to take them. "Boil the bark," he said. "Make tea 3 times a day. Quinine and water, 1 spoon morning and night. Fever should break in 2 days. If it doesn't, I'll ride for the doctor in town. Doctor won't come for Apache woman." Garrett's expression didn't change. "He will if I tell him she's my wife." The words hung in the air between them. Shocking. Impossible. A lie that could become protection if spoken often enough. Desba took the medicine. "Why you do this?" "Because your son is sick, and I have medicine." Seems simple enough. Nothing simple, not here, not between your people and mine. For the first time, something cracked in Garrett's careful control. Pain flashed across his face, quickly hidden, but too late unseen. "My people killed my family," he said quietly. "Your people killed my family. Seems like we're even on reasons to hate. But I'm tired of hating. It doesn't bring them back." He closed the cabinet, stepped back from the table, giving her space to leave. "There's more willow bark if you need it, and I can get whatever else might help. You just have to ask." Desba left with the medicine. Her hands were shaking. She treated Ashki through the day and into the night. The tea, the quinine. cool cloths on his forehead when the fever spiked. He drank what she gave him without complaint, his dark eyes watching her face, trusting her to save him as she'd saved him from Flynn's bullets. The fever broke on the second day, just as Garrett had predicted. Ashki sat up that morning, pale but clear-eyed, and asked for food in a gesture so ordinary it brought tears to Desba's eyes. She fed him the cornmeal mush she'd made, watching color return to his cheeks, watching life flow back into his small body. When she looked up, Garrett was standing at the barn entrance, not coming in, just watching. And when their eyes met, he nodded once, a soldier's nod. Acknowledgement of a battle won. Then he turned and went back to his work. That afternoon, while Ashki slept in healing rest, Desba explored the barn more thoroughly. In the back corner, she found a trunk covered with canvas. Dust suggested it hadn't been opened in some time. She shouldn't look. Knew she shouldn't. This was invasion of his privacy, his past, his pain. But she needed to know who this man was, needed to understand what drove him to help them, needed to see if the threat she sensed was real or imagined. She opened the trunk. Inside lay the pieces of a shattered life. A cavalry uniform, blue wool carefully folded, captain's insignia on the shoulders, worn but well-maintained, the cloth showing signs of repeated cleaning and pressing, the uniform of a man who'd taken pride in his service, a medal on a faded ribbon. The inscription read, Indian Campaigns 1881 to 1884, a daguerreotype photograph. Garrett younger, by perhaps 8 years, harder, faced, standing with a cavalry unit in front of a southwestern fort. His eyes in the photo held something his current eyes had lost: certainty, purpose, the conviction that what he did mattered. Another photograph, a woman white, perhaps 30 years old, pretty in a quiet way. Beside her, a small girl, maybe 6, with her mother's smile and her father's serious eyes. Both wore Sunday dresses. Both looked at the camera with the careful stillness of people who understood photographs were rare and precious. Desba's hands trembled as she picked up the third item in the trunk, a letter. Water-stained, ink faded but still legible. Official Army stationery. She read, Captain Walsh, your testimony regarding the incident at Cibecue Creek has been noted and recorded. However, your refusal to follow direct orders in the moment constitutes insubordination of the gravest kind. The lives of your fellow soldiers were placed at risk by your actions. You are hereby dishonorably discharged from the United States Army, effective immediately. All pay and benefits are forfeit. You are prohibited from wearing the uniform or claiming rank from this day forward. Signed, Colonel Bernard Fort Apache. Cibecue Creek. Desba knew that name. Every Apache knew that name. 1881, the massacre. Soldiers attacking an Apache camp. Women and children killed. Old men murdered. The military calling it a battle. The Apache calling it what it was, slaughter. She kept reading, finding a second document. A newspaper clipping yellowed with age. Apache raid claims 2 lives. Mrs. Eleanor Walsh and daughter Celia, age 6, killed when renegade band attacked homestead outside Fort Thomas. Captain Walsh, dishonorably discharged earlier that year for insubordination, was away at time of attack. Authorities report the attack was retribution for military actions against Apache settlements. No arrests have been made. The date on the clipping, September 1884. 2 years ago. His family dead 2 years. Killed by Apache raiders while he was away. Killed because he'd been discharged. Killed because he wasn't there to protect them. Killed by her people. Desba's breath stopped in her chest. Her vision grayed at the edges. The pieces assembled themselves into a picture she didn't want to see. This man had lost everything to Apache violence. His career for trying to stop the killing of Apache innocents. His family to Apache revenge for the killing of Apache people. A perfect circle of blood and pain. And yet he'd saved her. Footsteps on gravel. Garrett returning from the corral. Desba closed the trunk quickly, but not quickly enough. When he entered the barn and saw her kneeling beside it, saw the photographs in her hands, his face went carefully blank. Silence stretched between them. Heavy, suffocating. Desba stood slowly, held up the photograph of the woman and child. Your family. Not a question. A statement. Yes. Apache killed them, yes. You knew, when you saw me, you knew I was Apache. I knew. Desba's anger rose hot and bitter. Why you saved me, make yourself feel better, absolve your guilt, save one Apache to replace the ones you couldn't save at Sibicu. Garrett's jaw clenched, released. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion barely controlled. I tried to stop them. At Sibicu, ordered my men to stand down, stepped between the civilians and the guns. Got arrested for it, court-martialed, discharged in disgrace, lost everything. Not enough. Still not enough. We lost more. I know. The words came out broken. Believe me, I know. I counted the bodies after. 37 dead, 23 of them women or children. I wrote the number in my journal so I'd never forget. 37 reasons I couldn't follow those orders. He sat down heavily on a hay bale, suddenly looking every one of his 42 years. My commanding officer wanted no survivors, said we couldn't let word get out that the camp was peaceful, that we'd hit the wrong target based on bad intelligence. Wanted to bury the mistake under Apache blood. I refused. Tried to get the civilians to safety. Managed to save maybe a dozen before I was restrained. Desba felt her anger warring with understanding, felt her hate meeting his pain, and finding no satisfaction in the collision. The boy, she said. My Ashki. His father was cavalry scout, killed by his own Apache brothers for betraying the people. Now outlaws hunt us because he witnessed murder. Blood chases blood. Circle never ends. Then we stop it. Garrett looked up at her, and his eyes held something fierce and desperate. Right here, right now. We stop adding to the count. Easy for you to say. This your land, your territory. Garrett laughed. The sound held no humor. Is it? I bought this ranch with my discharge settlement. Blood money from the army that destroyed me for trying to do the right thing. Every stone in that house was laid with guilt. Every acre is a reminder that I'm here because they're not. I don't own anything, Desba. I just exist here, waiting. Waiting for what? I don't know. Maybe I was waiting for you. The words fell between them like stones into still water, ripples spreading outward, meaning, building meaning. Before Desba could respond, movement at the barn entrance caught her eye. Ashki stood there, awake, watching them both with those ancient, knowing eyes. He walked slowly toward Garrett, and Desba tensed, ready to intervene. But the boy didn't look frightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. The photograph of the little girl from the trunk, Celia. He must have seen it while Desba was reading the letter. Ashki held it out to Garrett. The man took it with trembling hands, looked at his daughter's face. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Ashki pointed to the photograph, then to himself. A question in the gesture. A recognition. You lost a child. I lost a father. We understand each other. Garrett's eyes filled. He blinked hard, but tears escaped anyway, tracking down his weathered cheeks. Her name was Celia, he said, his voice barely a whisper. She liked to sing. Knew all the words to every hymn at church even though she was only 6. Made up songs about the horses, about the desert, about anything that caught her fancy. Ashki listened, still silent, but listening with an intensity that spoke louder than words. I should have been there, Garrett continued. Should have protected them. But I was in Tucson drunk trying to forget Sibicu, trying to forget all of it, and while I was drowning in whiskey they were dying, calling for me, and I wasn't there. He looked at Desba. So when I saw you running through my land with armed men chasing you, when I saw that boy in your arms, I didn't see Apache or white or any of that. I saw a mother trying to save her child. And I thought maybe this time, maybe this once, maybe I can do what I couldn't do before. Desba felt something crack in her chest. The wall she'd built around her heart, brick by brick, loss by loss, developed a fissure. My husband, she said quietly. Neol, he was at Sibicu too. He was the scout. Garrett's head snapped up. What? He led cavalry to the camp, your unit. He told me before he died, told me about the officer who tried to stop it, who got arrested trying to save Apache lives. He spent rest of his life knowing he helped murder his own people. The impossible irony settled over them like snow. Their lives had intersected 5 years ago in blood and betrayal. Garrett trying to stop the killing, Neol enabling it. Both destroyed by the same massacre from opposite sides. He didn't fight back, Desba continued. When Apache warriors came for him, called him traitor, he let them kill him. Ashki watched his father choose death over defending himself. That's when he stopped speaking. Garrett looked at the boy with new understanding. He saw his father accept murder, and now sees you choose life, choose fight. Maybe that's why I trust you. Why he trusts you. You show different path. The moment stretched between them, fragile, precious, built on shared grief and the tentative hope that pain could become something other than more pain. Then from outside the sound of horses approaching. Multiple riders, moving fast. Garrett was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Get down, stay quiet. Desba pulled Ashki behind a hay bale. Her hand found the knife. Always the knife. Through the barn door she saw 4 riders coming up the road, not Flynn's men. These wore clean clothes, rode good horses. Town people. The lead rider was an older man, silver badge catching sunlight, sheriff. Behind him, 3 others, merchants by their dress. They reined up in front of the house. The sheriff dismounted, his eyes sweeping the property, noting details, cataloging threats. Walsh need a word. Garrett stepped out of the barn, rifle lowered but ready. Sheriff Hayes, wasn't expecting visitors. Got reports of gunfire on your land 3 nights back. Apache woman and a boy running from reservation. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? My land gets coyotes. Sometimes I shoot them. Hayes smiled without warmth. Sure you do. Mind if we look around? I do mind. But you got a warrant, I can't stop you. Don't need a warrant to pursue federal fugitives. Federal fugitives. Garrett's voice went cold. That's a strong accusation. You got proof of a crime, murder. Indian agent Bartholomew shot dead 4 nights ago at San Carlos. Apache woman named Desba is wanted for questioning. She was seen fleeing the scene with her half-breed boy. Inside the barn, Desba's blood went cold. They were framing her for Bartholomew's murder. Of course they were. Dead Apache woman couldn't testify about what Flynn had done. Garrett's voice carried clearly across the yard. Sounds like you need to find this Desba person and ask her what she saw. Can't imagine an Apache woman shooting a federal agent in broad daylight. Seems more likely someone else did the shooting and needs a scapegoat. Hayes's expression hardened. You calling me a liar, Walsh? I'm saying jumping to conclusions is bad law enforcement. Bartholomew was trying to protect Apache water rights from some mining interests. Seems like you'd want to look at who benefits from his death before you blame the most convenient target. I'll take your advice under consideration. Now about that search. Garrett stepped aside. House is open. Barn's got horses and hay, nothing else. Desba held her breath as footsteps approached the barn. Hayes entered 2 deputies behind him. They searched methodically, checked the stalls, examined the hay, looked in the trunk that Desba had left closed but not latched. Hayes opened it, saw the uniform, the photographs. His expression changed subtly, calculation replacing suspicion. Heard you were cavalry, dishonorably discharged for defending Indians. That true? That's what the papers say. Man like that might harbor fugitives. Man like that might have sympathies toward Apache over his own kind. Garrett's voice stayed level, but Desba heard the steel underneath. My sympathies are toward innocent people not getting murdered for crimes they didn't commit. Call that whatever you want. Hayes closed the trunk, looked around the barn one more time. His eyes passed over the hay bale where Desba and Ashki hid, covered by shadow and stillness. He turned and left. Outside she heard him mount his horse, heard the horses walking away, heard silence return. Long minutes passed before Garrett spoke. They're gone. Desba emerged shaking. Ashki clung to her, his small body trembling. They'll come back, she said. With more men, with warrants. They won't stop. Garrett looked at her steadily. Then we make sure they find nothing when they do. How? We make you disappear, legally. Desba didn't understand. Garrett walked to the house, returned with a sheaf of papers. Marriage certificate, blank, waiting to be filled. Marry me, he said. Real marriage, real papers filed in Tucson. You take my name, Desba Walsh. Ashki becomes my legal son. Federal warrant is for an Apache woman named Desba no surname. Once you're Mrs. Walsh, you're protected by different laws. That only works if no one knows. So we tell everyone. Tomorrow. Ride into town together. Yumi Ashki. Open declaration. I married an Apache woman. She's my wife. Touch her and answer to me. They'll kill you. Garrett smiled. It was not a happy expression. They've tried before. I'm still here. Desba looked at the papers, at this impossible offer, at this broken man offering her protection forged from his own destruction. Why? She whispered. Why risk everything? Because I couldn't save Ellie and Celia, but I can save you. His voice broke on the words. Maybe that's what I'm here for, not redemption, just one thing I do right before I die. Ashki stepped forward, took the papers from Garrett's hand, held them out to his mother, the boy who hadn't spoken in 16 months, who'd watched his father die and his world shatter, who'd witnessed murder and run through the desert pursued by men who wanted him dead. That boy looked at Garrett Walsh with something like hope. And Desba, who'd thought hope was a luxury she could no longer afford, felt it stir in her chest like a coal refusing to die. She took the papers. All right, she said. We try. Garrett nodded once. Tomorrow, then. We ride to Tucson. Make it legal. Make it real. But first came tonight, and tonight, for the first time since Bartholomew's blood had pooled in the reservation dust, Desba allowed herself to believe they might survive this. The twist would come later. The complications, the violence, the impossible choices. But tonight, in a barn on a ranch built with blood money, 3 broken people found something they'd all thought lost. Each other. And that for now was enough. Dawn broke cold over Yuma, crossing the sky, turning from black to gray to pale gold in the space of an hour. Garrett stood on his porch coffee cup, warming his hands, and watched the light creep across his land. Beside him, Desba wrapped herself in the blanket he'd given her, her eyes on the eastern horizon where the sun would soon appear. Inside the barn, Ashki still slept. The boy had finally found rest after 3 days of fever and fear, his small body curled in clean hay, breathing deep and even. We should leave before noon, Garrett said. Ride to Tucson. File the papers. Be back before dark. Desba nodded but didn't speak. Her silence wasn't hostile, just careful. A woman measuring distances, calculating risks, deciding how much trust she could afford. The town will see us, she said finally. Word will spread. That's the point. Can't protect you with a secret marriage. Has to be public. Has to be real. Real. She tested the word like it might break in her mouth. You marry Apache widow to save her from murder charge. Town will call you traitor. Worse than traitor. Garrett sipped his coffee. The bitterness matched his mood. Towns called me worse. I survived. Alone is different than with family. With us they have leverage, things to threaten, ways to hurt you. She wasn't wrong. Garrett had lived 2 years in isolation, needing nothing from Yuma Crossing except supplies he could get elsewhere if necessary. But a family needed more. School for the boy, medicine, community, all the things he'd abandoned when Eleanor and Celia died. Let them try, he said quietly. I've got nothing left to lose. Desba turned to look at him. In the growing light, her face showed the toll of 4 days running. Exhaustion carved lines around her eyes. Fear had worn grooves beside her mouth. But underneath, something harder. Something that had survived everything the world threw at it and refused to break. You have ranch, have land, have life. That's not nothing. It's not enough, not anymore. The words came out before he could stop them. Raw, honest. I built this place thinking it would be sanctuary, somewhere Eleanor and Celia and I could start over after the discharge. Instead, it became a tomb. I've been living in a grave for 2 years, Desba. Maybe it's time I climbed out. She held his gaze. And if we all fall into grave together, then at least I won't die alone. The sun broke the horizon. Light flooded across the desert, turning everything golden. For a moment the world looked new, unmarked by history, clean. Then a rooster crowed and the moment passed. Reality reasserted itself. They had decisions to make, papers to file, a town to face. I wake Ashkai, Desba said. We prepare. She went to the barn. Garrett watched her go, this woman he barely knew but had somehow committed to protecting with everything he had left. This impossible alliance built on shared grief and desperate necessity. He finished his coffee and went to saddle the horses. 2 hours later, they rode into Yuma Crossing as a family, Garrett on his Palomino, Desba on the bay mare riding astride despite the shocked looks from townspeople who thought Apache women should ride side saddle like proper ladies. Ashki seated in front of Garrett, the boy's small hands gripping the saddle horn, his eyes wide and watchful. The main street fell silent as they passed. People stopped, stared, whispered behind hands and fans and newspapers held like shields. Garrett felt their eyes like physical weight, judgment, condemnation, fear. Beside him, Desba sat straight-backed and proud. If the stares bothered her, she gave no sign. Her face was a mask of calm indifference. But Garrett saw her hand resting on her thigh, close to the knife she'd kept from Bartholomew's office. Ready. They reached the general store. Hiram Welch stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face set in disapproving lines. Garrett dismounted, helped Ashki down, offered his hand to Desba. She took it, and he felt the calluses on her palm. Working hands, surviving hands. Hiram, Garrett said evenly, need supplies, flour, salt, coffee, fabric for clothes. Welch's eyes moved from Garrett to Desba to Ashki. Back to Garrett. Can't serve you, not with her. The words hung in the desert air. Final, uncompromising. Her name is Desba Walsh, Garrett said, his voice carrying despite its quiet tone. My wife. And you'll serve her with the respect you'd show any customer, or I'll take my business to Tucson. All of it, including the standing order that keeps this store profitable through winter. Welch's jaw worked. His eyes showed the calculation. Profit versus principle. Commerce versus community pressure. A voice from inside the store interrupted the standoff. For heaven's sake, Hiram, sell the man his flour. Nell Coughlin stepped into the doorway. Garrett had met her once years ago when he'd first bought the ranch. Former Army nurse, widowed young, with a reputation for sharp words and sharper observations. She looked older than he remembered. Life in Yuma Crossing aged people fast. Nell, Welch protested, the town won't like it. The town didn't like it when my husband drank himself to death either, but you served him whiskey till the end. Nell's voice cut like a scalpel. Hypocrisy is our specialty, Hiram. Don't pretend otherwise. Sell the man his supplies. Welch looked between them, sighed, stepped aside. Fine, but don't expect me to be happy about it. I gave up expecting happiness from this town a long time ago, Garrett said. Inside the store smelled of coffee and leather, and the particular dust that accumulated in buildings that had stood through too many desert summers. Garrett moved to the counter and listed his needs. Welch filled them in silence, his movements sharp with suppressed anger. Nell approached Desba, who stood near the door with Ashki. The boy pressed close to his mother's side, overwhelmed by the enclosed space and watching eyes. You speak English? Nell asked. Yes? Good. Makes things easier. Nell crouched to Ashki's level. And you, young man, what's your name? The boy said nothing, looked at his mother. He doesn't speak, Desba said. Not since his father died. Nell's expression softened. Trauma. I've seen it before. Soldiers coming back from battles, children after attacks. The mind protects itself by shutting down. She stood. I was nurse at Fort Apache years back. Saw things I'm not proud I didn't stop. If the boy needs medical help or you do, I'll provide it. No judgment. Desba studied her. Why help us? Because kindness is free, and I have too much guilt weighing me down already. Adding more seems foolish. Before Desba could respond, the store door banged open. Sheriff Vernon Hayes entered, his deputy behind him. Hayes's eyes found Garrett immediately. Walsh, heard you were in town? Buying supplies. That against the law now? No, but harboring fugitives is. Hayes's hand rested on his gun belt. Not threatening, just present. Federal warrant is still active for the Apache woman. Murder suspect doesn't disappear just because you claim she's your wife. Garrett reached into his coat. Hayes tensed, but Garrett pulled out only papers. The marriage certificate freshly filed that morning in Tucson, legal, binding, stamped with territorial seal. Not claimed, is. Desba Walsh, my legal wife. Married 3 hours ago in Tucson. Witnessed and recorded. He handed the papers to Hayes. Check if you want. It's all proper. Hayes examined the documents. His jaw clenched. Proper don't mean right. Arizona territory law allows mixed marriage, Has since '73. You got a problem with territorial law, Sheriff. I got a problem with you making my job harder. Hayes returned the papers. Federal warrant still stands. Woman's wanted for questioning in Agent Bartholomew's murder. Desba stepped forward. Ashke clung to her skirt, but she kept her voice steady. I didn't kill anyone. Flynn did. Ask him about the scar on his left hand. Ask him why he chased us into the desert. Ask him about the silver mine and the water rights. Flynn says you shot Bartholomew during an argument about reservation conditions. Says the boy's lying because you told him to. Then let boy testify, under oath, in front of Marshall. Hayes's expression hardened. Boy's 7, half-breed. His word means nothing against a white man's testimony. Even if that white man is murderer and thief. Careful, woman. Accusing citizens of crimes is serious business. Garrett stepped between them. We've answered your question, Sheriff. Marriage is legal. We're causing no trouble. Unless you got an arrest warrant, I think we're done here. Hayes held Garrett's gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. You got 30 days, Walsh. Pay your bank debt or the bank forecloses. $800. That's a lot of money for a man with no cattle to sell and no crops coming in. I'll manage. I'm sure you will. But I heard tell the bank's been approached by some interested parties. Folks willing to pay good money for your water access. Funny how things work out when you make the wrong enemies. Hayes turned and left. His deputy followed. The door closed behind them, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Welch finished wrapping Garrett's purchases. His hands shook slightly as he calculated the total. $3.40. Garrett paid, took the supplies, led his family back into the harsh sunlight. They were loading the horses when a drunk staggered out of the saloon across the street. Silas Dougherty. Garrett recognized him from church years back, before grief and whiskey had hollowed him out, before Apache raiders had killed his wife and daughter and left him with nothing but bottles and blame. Walsh. Silas's voice carried across the street, slurred but venomous. Heard you married one of them Apache whore. Garrett tied down the supplies. Didn't respond. But Desba's hand went to her knife. My Eliza. Silas stumbled closer. My Rose, 6 years old. They scalped her. Walsh scalped a child, and you bring one of them into our town. Expect us to accept it. Go home, Silas. Sleep it off. Don't tell me what to do. You lost yours too. Eleanor and Celia dead because of these savages. How can you betray their memory? Garrett turned. His voice was quiet, but it carried. I lost them because I was too busy following orders to protect them. Because the army discharged me for trying to save innocent people. Because the cycle of killing took them like it's taken too many. I won't honor their memory by adding more bodies to the count. Coward, traitor. Silas spat in the dust. You're no better than them. Maybe I'm not, but I'm trying to be better than I was. Garrett helped Desba mount, lifted Ashke up to her, swung into his own saddle. They rode out of Yuma Crossing in silence, leaving behind them a town crackling with judgment and gathering storm clouds of rage. Back at the ranch, while Ashke explored the garden and Desba prepared an evening meal from their supplies, Garrett stood in his house and felt the weight of what he'd done settling onto his shoulders. He'd made her a target, made the boy a target, made himself more of an outcast than he'd been before, all based on the desperate hope that the law would protect them when he knew bone deep that the law protected who it wanted to protect and left the rest to burn. His eyes drifted to the cabinet where he kept Eleanor's things, letters, a brush, the locket she'd worn every day, things he hadn't touched in 2 years because touching them made the loss too real. He opened the cabinet now, pulled out the bundle of letters he'd written to her after Sibique Creek, after his discharge. Letters he'd never sent because she'd died before he could mail them. He unfolded one at random, his own handwriting shaky with drink and despair. My dearest Eleanor, I am being discharged. They say dishonorably, but my honor is intact. I refused to kill innocents. I stood between rifles and children and said no. The cost is everything we built. The ranch may be forfeit, our safety compromised. Your respect perhaps lost forever. If you wish to take Celia and return to your family in St. Louis Ferry will understand. I have failed you by choosing conscience over career. But I could not live with myself otherwise. could not be the man you married if I'd pulled that trigger. I pray you forgive me. I pray Celia never knows what her father nearly became. Forever yours, Garrett. The letter was dated March 1884, 6 months before Eleanor and Celia died. Footsteps on the porch. Garrett looked up to see Desba in the doorway. She held a tin plate of food. Steam rose from it. Simple fare, but prepared with care. "You eat," she said. Getting dark. He took the plate, set it aside. She saw the letter in his hands. "What is that?" "Something I wrote to my wife, before she died." Desba came closer, read over his shoulder. Her English was good enough to understand the meaning, if not every word. "She never received this. I was writing it when the writer came, told me about the raid. By the time I got there, she'd been dead for hours. Celia, too. Buried them the next day in ground so hard I broke 2 shovels digging." "You blame yourself." "Of course I blame myself. If I'd been there, if I hadn't been discharged, if I'd just followed orders and stayed in the army with protections for my family, they'd be alive. Or you'd be dead too." Desba walked to the cabinet where Garrett had found the letter. Her fingers traced the edge of another document beneath. She pulled it out. Military letterhead, official seal, faded but legible. She read aloud, her voice halting. "Incident report, Apache raid, September 12, 1884. Retaliatory attack on homestead of former Captain Garrett Walsh by Apache warriors believed to be connected to survivors of Cibecue Creek engagement. Assessment raid was direct response to military actions undertaken by Walsh's former unit in 1881. Warriors identified homestead through desertion records. 2 civilian casualties, Eleanor Walsh, Celia Walsh, classified as collateral damage in ongoing Apache resistance." Her hands shook. The paper fluttered. She looked at Garrett. "Your wife, your daughter, they died because of Cibecue, because you were part of that unit." Garrett's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. "The Apache who came for us, they were relatives of people killed at Cibecue. They tracked down every man in my unit. Most were still active duty protected on military bases, but I'd been discharged, living alone, undefended. So Eleanor and Celia died for massacre you tried to stop. They died because I wore the uniform. Didn't matter that I refused to fire. Didn't matter that I tried to save people. I was there. That made me guilty in their eyes." Desba felt the weight of it crushing down. Garrett's family killed by Apache seeking justice for Cibecue. Her husband killed by Apache for enabling Cibecue. Both destroyed by the same massacre from opposite sides. "Blood chasing blood," she whispered. "Like I said, it never ends. Not unless we end it. Right here, right now." Garrett laughed. It was a broken sound. "Maybe that would have been better." Desba slapped him, hard, across the face. The crack echoed in the small room. Garrett stared at her shock, overriding his grief. "Don't," she said fiercely. "Don't wish for death. Ashkey needs you. I need you. You want honor Eleanor's memory. Live. Fight. Protect what you have now instead of mourning what you lost. You don't understand." "Blood chasing blood," she whispered. "Like I said, it never ends. Not unless we end it. Right here, right now." Garrett's voice was rough. "Maybe death would have been easier." Desba slapped him, hard, across the face. The crack echoed in the small room. Garrett stared at her shock, overriding his grief. "Don't," she said fiercely. "Don't wish for death. Ashkey needs you. I need you. You want honor Eleanor's memory. Live. Fight. Protect what you have now instead of mourning what you lost." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice shook with emotion. "Neol chose death when warriors came for him. He thought he deserved it, but his death changed nothing. Just made more widows, more orphans, more pain." She stepped closer. "We choose different path. We choose life even when death feels deserved. We choose fight even when surrender feels easier." Ashkey watched his father choose death over defending himself. Watched him accept murder as deserved punishment. That's when Boy stopped speaking. Garrett's mind reeled. The connections. The impossible tragic irony. Neol had led the cavalry. Garrett had tried to stop them. Both had been destroyed by the same event from opposite sides. Both had lost everything. And now their widow and child sat in Garrett's house, bound by papers and desperation and this terrible shared history. "He didn't fight back," Garrett repeated. "He let them kill him. He thought he deserved death, thought it was only justice. Desba's eyes held pain so deep it had its own gravity. But what did his death accomplish? Nothing. Didn't bring back the dead, didn't heal the wounded, just made more grief, more orphans, more widows. So what do? We choose different path. We choose life even when death feels deserved. We choose fight even when surrender feels easier. She was right. Garrett knew she was right. But the weight of guilt was so heavy. The memory of Sibique, of Eleanor, and Celia, of all the ways he'd failed, pressed down like a physical force. Outside, a sound interrupted them. Horses, multiple riders, coming fast. Garrett grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Desba pulled her knife and positioned herself between the door and where Ashki played in the next room. Through the gathering dusk, Garrett saw them coming. 6 men, armed, riding hard toward the ranch. He recognized the leader, Jacob Flynn. "Get Ashki," Garrett said quietly. "Back room, lock the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear. I fight with you. You protect him. That's the fight that matters." Desba hesitated. Then she ran to get the boy. Garrett stepped onto the porch, rifle ready, waiting. Flynn and his men pulled up 20 yards out, close enough to talk, far enough to make shooting difficult. Professional distance. These men knew violence. "Walsh." Flynn sat easy in his saddle, a man comfortable with confrontation. "Heard you married the Apache woman. That true?" "It's true." "Then you're harboring a murderer. Federal crime. I'm here to collect her. Got authorization from Sheriff Hayes." "Hayes has no jurisdiction over my property. This is private land. You're trespassing." Flynn smiled. "See, that's where you're wrong. Woman killed a federal agent. That makes it federal business, which means territorial law don't protect you. She didn't kill anyone. You did. Boy saw you. Boy's a liar. Half-breed savage, probably raised to hate whites. His testimony means nothing. Maybe, but I'm white. And I'm willing to testify I heard gunshots from the reservation the night Bartholomew died. Heard men chasing someone through the desert. Recognized your voice when you threatened to kill witnesses." Flynn's expression hardened. "You want to make this complicated, Walsh? I want you off my land. Not without the woman and the boy." "Then you're leaving disappointed." Flynn leaned forward in his saddle. His hand rested on his gun. "I can come back with 20 men, burn you out. Take what I want from the ashes, that what you prefer. I prefer you try. Let's see how that works out for you." Silence stretched between them. A test of wills, a measurement of commitment. Finally, Flynn straightened. "You got 1 week, Walsh. Pay your bank debt or lose this land. Then we'll see how brave you are when you got nothing left to defend." He wheeled his horse and rode off. His men followed. Dust rose in their wake, golden in the last light of day. Garrett stood on the porch until they disappeared. Then his legs gave out and he sat down hard, the rifle clattering beside him. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage, from the absolute certainty that this was far from over. Desba emerged from the house. Ashki clung to her skirt. "They'll come back," she said. "I know. With more men, more guns." "I know. We can't win against those odds." Garrett looked up at her. "Then we change the odds." Over the next 3 days, the siege mentality settled over the ranch like a fog. Garrett fortified what he could, reinforced the barn doors, moved ammunition into strategic locations, mapped fields of fire and escape routes. But he knew, and Desba knew, and even Ashki seemed to understand with his ancient knowing eyes, that boards and bullets wouldn't be enough. On the 4th day, while Garrett worked on the north fence, he heard riders approaching again. He grabbed his rifle ready for another confrontation with Flynn. But these riders were different. Apache, 12 of them. Warriors in traditional dress carrying weapons that ranged from rifles to bows. They moved with the fluid grace of people who'd been born to the desert, who knew every rock and shadow. Leading them was an elderly woman. Her face was a map of years and wisdom and grief. She rode a paint horse with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle. Garrett recognized her from Desba's description. Tala, the medicine woman, Desba's aunt. He lowered his rifle but didn't put it away. Waited. The warriors fanned out surrounding the ranch but not advancing. Tala rode forward alone. She stopped 10 feet from Garrett and studied him with eyes that missed nothing. When she spoke, her English was perfect, unaccented, the voice of someone educated in missionary schools but unbowed by the experience. "Garrett Walsh, I know your name. Know your story. The soldier who tried to save my people at Sibique. You were there. My sister's daughter was there, 12 years old. You pulled her from burning Wickiup, hid her in the wash. She survived because of you." Garrett felt something loosen in his chest. One saved. Out of 37 dead. But one. "I'm glad." "Don't be glad yet. I'm not here to thank you. I'm here for Desba." As if summoned, Desba emerged from the barn. When she saw Tala, her face showed shock, then joy, then fear in quick succession. "Aunt Tala." "Niece." The word held weight, history, judgment. Tala dismounted, walked past Garrett without acknowledging him further, approached Desba, and spoke in rapid Apache. Garrett couldn't follow all of it, but he caught the important words: betrayal, white man, shame. Desba responded in the same language. Her voice was firm, defensive but not apologetic. The conversation stretched for minutes. Then Tala switched to English, perhaps wanting Garrett to understand. "You married white man. Wear his clothes. Take his name. Speak his language to your son. This is betrayal. This is survival. Survival or surrender. You think becoming white saves you. You're wrong. You become neither Apache nor white, ghost between worlds. And Ashki grows up with no people. Ashki grows up alive. That's what matters. Life without culture is not life. It's existence, empty, meaningless." Garrett stepped forward. "She's not empty. She's brave. She's protecting her son the only way she can." Tala turned her sharp gaze on him. "You think marriage protects her white man's law? That law hung my brother. That law stole our land. That law herds us onto reservation to starve. And you think it protects Apache woman because she has your name? It's better than nothing. Nothing is honest. This is lie dressed as salvation." Ashki appeared in the barn door. He saw Tala and walked toward her slowly. The old woman's expression softened. "Little one, you remember me?" Ashki nodded. "You speak now." Ashki looked at Garrett, then back to Tala. He spoke in Apache. Short sentences, simple words, but words. Tala's eyebrows rose. "He says you taught him to speak again, the white soldier." "I didn't teach him anything, just gave him time and space to heal." "And you think this makes you father, teacher, savior? I think this makes me someone who cares whether he lives or dies." Ashki spoke again, more Apache, pointing between Garrett and Tala. His voice held something Garrett had never heard before. Frustration. Anger, even. A child pushed too far by adults who couldn't see past their own pain. Tala listened. Then she looked at Garrett with something that might have been respect. "The boy says he is Apache, but he is also Garrett's son now. He says both true, not choose one. He says we make him choose, we hurt him worse than Flynn's bullets could." Wisdom from a 7-year-old child. Garrett felt humbled. "The boy speaks truth," Tala said slowly. "Maybe I am wrong. Maybe there is path between worlds. Maybe he can walk it." She turned to Desba. "But you must choose. Reservation offers safety of tribe, of people who understand you, or here with white man facing white rage alone." "Not alone," Garrett said. "With me. One man against town, against army, against all who hate Apache. You think that's enough? It's all I have to offer." Tala studied him for long moments. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped close and placed her hand on his chest, over his heart, her palm warm through his shirt. "You carry heavy burden. I feel it. Guilt like stones, but also something else. Something good. Desire to protect, to heal, to make right what was wrong." She stepped back. "I return in 3 days. If Desba chooses reservation, I take her and boy with me. Protection of tribe. If she chooses you, she walks this path knowing it leads to suffering." "All paths lead to suffering," Desba said quietly. "Question is what we suffer for." Tala nodded, mounted her horse. Her warriors gathered. Before leaving, she spoke one more time. "Garrett Walsh, you saved my sister's daughter at Sibique. For that I give you gift. Warning, Flynn burns town tonight, creates chaos. Uses it to attack you while authorities are distracted. Prepare." Then she and her warriors disappeared into the desert as silently as they'd come. Garrett and Desba stood in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that looked like fire. "She's right about the suffering," Desba said. "I know. We could run. Mexico. Start over. Could, but Flynn would follow. And running means Ashkey grows up always looking over his shoulder. Fighting means he might not grow up at all." Garrett had no answer to that, because she was right. Every choice led to pain. Every path held danger. There were no good options, only less terrible ones. They went inside as darkness fell, prepared as best they could, weapons loaded, ammunition counted, escape routes confirmed, and they waited. The fire started near midnight. Garrett saw the glow first, orange light against the northern sky. Too bright to be lamplight, too sustained to be lightning. Yuma Crossing was burning. He grabbed his rifle. Desba already had hers. "I have to go," Garrett said. "Help them. Town needs every able body." "That's what Flynn wants. Divide us. He attacks here while you're gone." "I know, but I can't let innocent people burn. Even people who hate us. Especially them, because if I don't help now, we'll never have chance at acceptance later." Desba understood. She nodded. "Then go. Ashkey and I defend here." "You sure?" She checked her rifle, chambered around. "I am Apache warrior's widow. I know how to fight." Garrett kissed her. Quick. Hard. The first real kiss between them. It tasted of smoke and desperation, and something that might become love if they survived long enough. Then he rode toward the burning town. Behind him, Desba locked the doors, checked the windows, positioned Ashkey in the safest room, and waited for the attack she knew was coming. In Yuma Crossing, chaos reigned. Buildings burned. People ran with buckets of water that evaporated before reaching flames. Children cried. Women screamed. Men shouted orders that no one followed. Garrett found Mayor Boone trying to organize a fire line. "Walsh, thank God we need every hand. Where's Sheriff Hayes? Dead, shot in the street. Flynn's gang is everywhere, burning, looting, killing anyone who resists." Garrett's military training kicked in. He assessed the situation with the cold calculation of a man who'd seen combat. "Forget saving buildings. Get people to the church. Stone walls won't burn. Fortify there." "But the town?" "Town's already lost." "Save the people." Boone hesitated, then nodded, started shouting new orders. Garrett helped herd civilians toward the church, women carrying children, old men clutching possessions, the young and able-bodied grabbing what weapons they could find. A shot rang out. Close. Garrett turned and saw Flynn on horseback, torch in one hand, pistol in the other. "Walsh, I know you're here. Come out and face me." Garrett stepped into the street, rifle ready. "You wanted chaos, Flynn. Congratulations, you got it. But it won't get you what you want. Won't it? While you're here playing hero, my men are at your ranch, taking the woman, the boy, everything you tried to protect." Garrett's blood went cold. The trap. He'd walked right into it. "You're lying." Flynn smiled. "Am I only one way to find out? Stay here and save strangers, or run home and try to save your family. Can't do both." The choice tore Garrett in half. The town needed him, needed his leadership, his weapons, his training. But Desba and Ashkey faced 6 armed men alone. He looked at the civilians huddling in the church, at Mayor Boone trying to organize defense, at Nell Coughlin tending wounded with supplies from her medical bag. They would survive or they wouldn't. But Desba and Ashkey needed him now. He ran for his horse. Behind him, Flynn's laughter echoed through the burning town. Garrett rode hard through the darkness. The ranch was 4 miles. At full gallop, maybe 20 minutes. Every second felt like an hour. He heard the gunfire before he saw the ranch. Rifle shots, the deeper boom of a shotgun. Return fire from multiple directions. He dismounted while still moving, hitting the ground at a run, rifle up, scanning for targets. The barn was under siege. 6 men, just as Flynn had said, positioned around it in a rough semicircle, firing at the doors, the windows, any opening they could find. From inside, return fire. Desba's rifle, precise, controlled. She'd already hit 2 of them. Garrett saw blood on the ground, wounded men taking cover. But she couldn't hold forever. Eventually she'd run out of ammunition, or make a mistake, or they'd rush the doors and overwhelm her. Garrett took position behind the corral fence, drew a bead on the nearest attacker, fired. The man went down. The others turned searching for this new threat. Garrett fired again, missed. The man ducked behind a water trough. "It's Walsh. Flynn didn't say nothing about him being here. Take him down. Get the woman." Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Bullets smacked into the fence posts around Garrett. He dropped, rolled, came up in a different position, fired twice. Hit one, missed one. Then the barn door opened. Desba emerged, rifle blazing. She moved with the fluid grace of someone trained in warfare. Hit 2 men before they could react. But there were too many. A man Garrett recognized, Flynn's Lieutenant Calhoun, circled behind the barn. Garrett saw him, but couldn't get a clear shot. "Desba, behind you." She turned, too late. Calhoun grabbed her. They struggled. The rifle fell. Then a shot from inside the barn, high-pitched. A child's scream of defiance and terror mixed. Calhoun jerked. Blood bloomed on his shoulder. He released Desba and stumbled back. Ashki stood in the barn doorway, holding a pistol in both small hands, his face white with shock. He'd shot a man. 7 years old, and he'd taken his first life to save his mother. The remaining attackers, seeing their numbers dwindling and their leader wounded, broke, ran for their horses, fled into the darkness. Silence fell over the ranch, broken only by the sound of Calhoun groaning, the crackling of distant fires, the harsh breathing of 3 people who'd just survived impossible odds. Desba ran to Ashki, pulled him into her arms. The boy was shaking. The gun fell from his hands. "I killed him," Ashki whispered. First words anyone had heard him speak in English. "I killed a man." "You saved me," Desba said fiercely. "Remember that. You saved my life." But Garrett saw the boy's eyes, saw the light die a little, saw innocence murdered by necessity. He gathered both of them close. This broken family he'd claimed, this impossible alliance. In the distance, Yuma Crossing still burned, and somewhere out there Flynn was laughing. They'd won the battle, but the war had just begun, and the cost was already higher than any of them had imagined. Dawn came gray and cold over the smoldering ruins of Yuma Crossing. Garrett stood in what had been the main street, surveying damage that looked like war had passed through. 5 buildings completely gone. The bank a blackened skeleton. The general store half collapsed. Bodies covered with sheets lined the church steps, waiting for identification and burial. 9 dead, 23 wounded, a town's innocence burned away in a single night of violence. Mayor Boone approached his face, aged 10 years by smoke and exhaustion. "Walsh, thank you for coming back. Your tactics saved lives. The church held." Garrett barely heard him. His eyes were on the northern horizon, where his ranch lay, 4 miles distant, where Desba and Ashki waited, surrounded by wounded attackers and the ghosts of choices no child should have to make. "I need to get home." "Wait." Boone grabbed his arm. "There's something you should know. We found Sheriff Hayes's body. He'd been shot in the back, close range, execution style. Flynn's work. More than that. We found papers on him, letters, payments from Flynn's mining operation. Hayes was on his payroll, had been for months. Everything he did, every harassment, every threat against you and your wife, it was all planned. Flynn bought himself a lawman." The revelation should have shocked Garrett. It didn't. He'd suspected as much, but confirmation brought cold clarity. "Where's Flynn now?" "Gone. Him and what's left of his gang. Rode south before dawn, probably heading for Mexico." Garrett shook his head. "He's not done. Not while Ashki can testify. Not while Desba's alive to contradict his story about Bartholomew." "What do you need?" "Time. And maybe some goodwill from this town. Think I've earned that." Boone looked at the church where 24 people sheltered alive because Garrett had organized their defense. Looked at Nell Coughlin tending wounded with supplies Garrett had helped carry through smoke and bullets. Looked at families reunited because one man had chosen to help instead of hiding. "I think you've earned more than that. But changing hearts, that takes longer than one night." Garrett mounted his horse. "Then we'd better start now." He rode home through morning light that turned the desert gold. The beauty felt obscene after a night of death. Nature didn't care about human violence. The sun rose regardless. The desert bloomed regardless. Life continued with indifferent grace. At the ranch he found Desba sitting on the porch steps, rifle across her knees, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Inside the house, through the window, he could see Ashki curled on the bed, finally sleeping after hours of trauma-induced wakefulness. Garrett dismounted, sat beside Desba. Neither spoke for long minutes. "He won't talk again," Desba finally said. Spoke those words, then nothing, back to silence. "He killed a man. That breaks something in a person, especially a child. He's 7 years old, should be playing, learning, growing. Instead, he's a killer. He's a survivor. There's a difference." Desba turned to look at him. Her eyes held an anger so deep it could have swallowed the world. Don't make it noble. He took a life to save mine. That burden will crush him unless we find a way to lift it." She was right. Garrett knew she was right. But he had no answers, no wisdom. Just the same guilt he'd carried for years now, multiplied by watching this child forced into the same darkness. "Calhoun's dead," Garrett said. "Bled out before dawn. The others ran. I let them go. Should have killed them all. Maybe. But then what? We become what they are, killers hunting killers forever, better than victims." Garrett put his arm around her. She stiffened, then slowly relaxed against him. Two people holding each other in the wreckage of the world they'd tried to build. "Town knows about Hayes now," Garrett said. "Found proof he was working for Flynn. That changes things. Makes you less suspect. Makes Flynn more wanted. Doesn't bring back the dead. Doesn't erase what Ashki did. No, but it's something." Footsteps behind them. Both turned hands, moving toward weapons. But it was Nell Coughlin riding up on a borrowed horse, her medical bag tied to the saddle. "Heard there was wounded here," she said without preamble. "Came to help." Desba studied her. "Why?" "Because I'm a nurse and people are hurt. Don't need more reason than that." She dismounted and went to examine the wounded attackers they'd tied up in the barn. Professional. Efficient. Treating bullet wounds without asking who'd fired the shots or why. When she emerged an hour later, her hands were bloody, but the wounded were bandaged and stable. "They'll live to stand trial," she said. "If there's a trial, federal marshals tend to take their time getting to places like this." "There'll be a trial," Garrett said. "I'll make sure of it." Nell washed her hands in the water barrel. "Town's talking about you. About how you came back to help when you could have stayed here. How you organized the defense, saved lives. And Silas Doherty wants to apologize." That stopped Garrett cold. Silas, sober for the first time in months, saw you pulling people from burning buildings, saw you risk your life for strangers who'd called you traitor. Broke something in him. Or fixed something. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. She mounted her horse. "He'll be by later. If you'll see him." "I'll see him." Nell rode away. Garrett and Desba sat in silence processing this news. Small changes, tiny shifts in a town's heart. Not redemption, not acceptance, just the first crack in a wall of hate. It was something. Over the next 2 days, the ranch became an unexpected gathering point. Silas came first, hat in hand, smelling of soap instead of whiskey. "Walsh, I owe you words. Apology don't cover it, but it's what I got." Garrett listened as Silas spoke, about his wife and daughter, about the grief that had poisoned him, about watching Garrett save people and realizing that hate hadn't protected anyone, hadn't brought his family back, had only made the world darker. "Can't take back what I said. Can't undo the hurt, but I'm asking man to man for chance to be better." Garrett shook his hand. "We're all trying to be better. Welcome to the struggle." Desba watched from the porch. Later she asked, "You forgive him?" "After everything he said, I forgive him for being broken by grief. Same grief that broke me. If I can't extend grace to someone in that kind of pain, what kind of man am I? Soft? Weak? Too trusting? Maybe, but I'd rather be soft than hard. World's got enough hard men. Look where that's gotten us." She considered this. "In my culture, forgiveness is earned through action, not words. Then we'll see if his actions match his apology." The second visitor came at dusk on the third day. Mayor Boone arrived with 2 other men, town council members. They looked uncomfortable, shifting weight from foot to foot, avoiding eye contact. "Walsh, Mrs. Walsh," Boone cleared his throat. "We've come with a proposition." "I'm listening." "Town needs rebuilding. We need skilled people, people who know construction, organization, leadership. You demonstrated those qualities during the fire. And we're asking you to help, not as outsider, as citizen. Full member of community with all rights and protections that entails." The offer hung in the air. Acceptance. Integration. The thing Garrett had stopped hoping for 2 years ago. But Desba spoke before he could. "What about me? What about my son?" Boone met her eyes. "You're Walsh's wife. Legal and binding. That makes you citizen too. And the boy, he's your son. Our town's got a school. Teachers willing to take him if you're willing to send him." "Willing?" Desba's voice was sharp. "After your people called him half-breed, after they wanted us dead, after we were wrong, after we saw that your family bled for us when you didn't have to, that counts for something. Should count for everything." It was Ashki who made the decision. He emerged from the house drawn by voices, walked to his mother and took her hand, looked at the men from town, then spoke in Apache. Desba translated her voice, catching. "He says, I want to learn, want to read, want to be ready when bad men come again. He wants school." The council members nodded. "School it is, then." They left with promises of lumber and supplies to repair the barn, with invitations to Sunday church service, with the tentative beginnings of community. After they were gone, Garrett found Desba in the garden, weeding with fierce concentration. "You're angry." "I'm terrified," she corrected. "They accept us now because we were useful. What happens when we're not? When memory of fire fades and old hatreds return? Then we deal with it, together." "You have too much faith in people. And you have too little faith in yourself. They didn't accept us because we were useful. They accepted us because we were human. Because in the moment when it mattered, we chose to help instead of hate. That's not utility. That's character." She wanted to argue. He could see it. But she was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of running. Tired of carrying anger like armor. "Maybe," she said finally. "We try. For Ashki, we try." The fourth day brought the storm they'd been waiting for. Jacob Flynn returned. He came at noon with 20 men, twice the force he'd had before, heavily armed, organized. No longer a gang of outlaws, but a small army. They surrounded the ranch in a wide semicircle. No cover close enough to attack from. No way to escape without running a gauntlet of gunfire. Flynn rode forward alone, stopped 50 yards out. His voice carried clear in the desert air. "Walsh, last chance. Send out the woman and boy or everyone dies." Garrett stepped onto the porch. Desba beside him, Ashki between them. "Can't do that, Flynn. Then you're a dead man. Maybe, but you'll be dead too. And all your men look around." Flynn's confidence wavered. He glanced behind him, saw nothing but empty desert. "Bluffing won't save you, Walsh. Not bluffing. Look north." Flynn turned. His men turned, and saw them coming. Apache warriors, 20 of them, led by Tala on her paint horse, moving at full gallop, war cries echoing across the desert, ancient and terrible and beautiful. Flynn's men panicked, half-wheeled their horses to face this new threat. The others kept guns trained on the ranch. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Then from the south came more riders, townspeople, Silas Doherty, Mayor Boone, Nell Coughlin, with a rifle she clearly knew how to use. 24 citizens of Yuma Crossing armed and determined. Flynn found himself caught between 3 forces, outnumbered, surrounded, the hunter becoming prey. "This is impossible," he breathed. Tala rode up beside Garrett, spoke loud enough for all to hear. "Apache and white, fighting together. Something you didn't expect. Something you couldn't plan for." "They'll never accept you," Flynn shouted at Garrett. "You're still outsider, still traitor." "Maybe," Garrett said, "but I'm their traitor, their outsider, and that's enough." Flynn's hand moved toward his gun. Tala's warriors raised rifles. Townspeople did the same. Garrett kept his weapon lowered, but ready. "Last chance is yours now, Flynn. Surrender, face trial, or die here." For a moment the world balanced on the edge of violence. One move, one shot. Everything would explode. Then Flynn smiled. "You think this ends here? You think surrender means justice? I got money, lawyers, connections. I'll walk free in 6 months, and when I do, I'll come back. For all of you." He reached not for his gun, but for something in his saddlebag, pulled out a stick of dynamite, already lit, fuse burning. If I can't have this land, nobody can. He threw it toward the ranch house. Time slowed. Garrett saw the dynamite arcing through air, saw Desba push Ashki down, saw Tala raising her rifle, saw townspeople diving for cover. The dynamite hit the porch steps, bounced, rolled. Garrett had maybe 3 seconds before it exploded. Not enough time to throw it away. Not enough time to get everyone clear. Enough time to cover it. He dove on the dynamite, covered it with his body, braced for the end. In those final seconds, he thought of Eleanor and Celia. Thought they'd be proud he'd died protecting others instead of failing them. Thought this was a good death, a worthy death. Thought he was ready. The explosion never came. Water drenched him, cold, shocking. He looked up to see Ashki standing over him, the water barrel tipped and empty. The boy had doused the fuse, 7 years old, traumatized, silent, but still capable of saving lives instead of taking them. Garrett grabbed the boy and held him. Thank you, thank you. Flynn was already moving, spurring his horse, trying to escape while everyone was distracted. He made it 20 yards before Silas Daugherty's rifle barked. The shot took Flynn in the shoulder. He fell from his horse, tried to rise, fell again. His men, seeing their leader down, threw their weapons, surrendered. The fight went out of them like air from a punctured bladder. Tala's warriors rounded them up. Townspeople covered them with rifles. Mayor Boone rode forward with rope to bind prisoners. It was over. Garrett stood on shaking legs, looked at Desba, at Ashki, at Tala and Silas and Nell and all these impossible allies. We won, he said, disbelief in his voice. We survived, Desba corrected. Not same thing. She was right. Winning implied something clean, final. This was messy, complicated. People were dead, buildings burned, a child had killed, another had saved. Nothing was resolved, just paused, but they were alive, and that counted for something. The aftermath took days to sort through. Federal Marshal Edmund Carter arrived from Tucson, drawn by telegraph reports of the fire and violence. He was old school, hard, but fair. He listened to Ashki's testimony, recorded every word, examined Bartholomew's body exhumed from hasty burial, found the bullet wound matched Flynn's gun. Clear case of murder, Carter said. Boy's testimony is solid. Corroborating evidence supports it. Flynn will hang. And his men, Garrett asked. Accessories, prison time, maybe 10 years if they cooperate. What about Desba? The warrant, Carter looked at her. Federal warrant was based on Flynn's accusation. With him exposed as the real killer, charges are dropped. You're free, ma'am. Garrett stepped forward. What about the bounty? Flynn posted $500 on her head. Half the territory saw those wanted posters. Carter pulled a folded document from his coat. Bounties rescinded. Flynn had no legal authority to post reward in the first place, was using private funds to circumvent federal process. I've sent telegrams to every sheriff and marshal station from here to the Mexico border. All wanted posters are being destroyed. $500. In 1886 Arizona, that was 6 months' wages for a skilled laborer, a fortune to a desperate man, enough to make Desba a target for every bounty hunter, drifter, and outlaw between the territories. For weeks she'd known that price hung over her head, known that strangers looked at her and saw profit, known that any man with a gun and no conscience could claim her dead or alive and collect a reward that would change his life. And now, with a stroke of a federal pen, that threat evaporated. Garrett saw her face, saw the tension draining from shoulders that had been locked tight since the night she'd run through the desert. It's really over, Desba asked, her voice barely a whisper. The legal part is, Carter said. Flynn will hang. His men will see prison. The charges are dropped. The bounty's gone. You're a free woman, Mrs. Walsh. Free. The word sounded foreign, strange. Desba had been running for so long that freedom felt like a trap. But Ashki smiled. First real smile since the shooting. And that made it real. Over the following weeks, life found new patterns. Not normal. Nothing would be normal again, but functional, livable. Ashki started school. Miss Hartley, the young teacher, worked with him patiently. He still didn't speak much, but he learned, read, wrote. slowly came back to himself. Desba sold traditional medicines in town. Some people bought, others didn't. Progress was measured in inches. Garrett worked rebuilding Yuma Crossing. His construction skills honed building. His ranch proved valuable. He became part of community through sweat and sawdust. Silas stayed sober, worked beside Garrett. They didn't become friends, but they became something, allies in shared grief, men trying to build instead of destroy. Tala visited monthly, bridge between reservation and town, bringing Apache families to trade, creating connections where only suspicion had existed, not perfect integration. Arguments happened, slurs were spoken, old hatreds flickered like coals that never quite died, but also moments of grace. Apache children playing with white children, Desba teaching Nell traditional healing, Garrett learning more Apache from Tala's patient instruction. Small victories, tiny revolutions, the world changing one conversation at a time. 3 months after Flynn's arrest, Garrett received unexpected visitors. 2 businessmen from Tucson, well-dressed, well-spoken, money written in every thread of their suits. "Mr. Walsh, we represent mining interests. We'd like to purchase your land. $5,000, cash." Garrett looked at them, looked at Desba beside him, at Ashkey playing in the garden with seeds Tala had brought from the reservation. "Land's not for sale. It's a generous offer, more than fair market value." "I'm sure it is." Answers still no. The businessman's smile thinned. "Mr. Walsh, we'll be back, with better offers, or with legal means to acquire what we need. The water access your land provides is too valuable to ignore." After they left, Desba asked the question Garrett had been avoiding. "They won't stop. Flynn's dead, but others come. Always others." "I know. So what we do," Garrett looked at his ranch, at the house he'd built with blood money, at the land that had been his prison and his sanctuary, at this life he'd constructed from grief and guilt. "We fight, not with guns, with presence, with refusing to be driven out, with showing it's possible for people like us to exist. For how long? As long as it takes. Maybe our whole lives, maybe Ashkey's children's lives, but someone has to be first. First what? First family like ours, Apache and white. Living together, not hiding, just living." Desba was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You ask me to bet everything on hope, on chance that world becomes better. I'm asking you to bet on us, on what we've already survived. If we made it through Flynn, through fire, through all of it, we can make it through whatever comes next." She looked at him, really looked, seeing not the broken cavalry captain, not the guilty survivor, but the man who'd stepped between her and bullets, who'd married her to save her life, who'd become father to her son without asking for anything in return. "All right," she said, "we stay, we fight, we try." 1 year later, Garrett stood on the same porch where everything had started. The ranch had grown. New barn replacing the burned one, garden expanded, Ashkey's school projects hanging on the walls inside. Desba came out carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and stood beside him, her shoulder touching his, comfortable, natural. The distance between them finally bridged. "Tala brings news," Desba said. 3 more families left reservation, want to buy land near town, start farms. Town council approved it, after much arguing, but yes, they see what we built. Think maybe it works." "And what do you think?" Desba smiled. It still surprised him when she smiled. "I think we are foolish, stubborn, probably doomed. But we are alive. Together, that's victory enough." Ashkey appeared in the doorway. He'd grown in the last year, taller, stronger, still quiet, but no longer silent. He spoke when he had something to say. The rest of the time he listened and learned. "Papa," he said. The word came easier now. "Mama, school wants me to speak. About what happened. About Flynn. About everything." Garrett and Desba exchanged glances. This was the conversation they'd been avoiding. The trauma. The violence. The weight of what Ashkey had witnessed and done. "You don't have to," Garrett said. "No one can make you relive that. I know. But Miss Hartley says telling truth helps. Says silence lets lies grow. Says if I speak other children understand." "Understand what?" "That Apache and white both bleed, both hurt, both heal. That we're not so different. Wisdom beyond his years, earned through pain no child should know. "Then you speak," Desba said. "We'll be there, supporting you." 2 weeks later, the whole town gathered in the church for Ashki's testimony. Not a trial, not an official proceeding, just a child telling his story, witnessed by the community that had almost destroyed him and had ultimately helped save him. Ashki stood at the front, small against the backdrop of the church altar, but steady, clear-eyed. He spoke in English and Apache, both Desba translating when needed. He told about his father's death, about witnessing Bartholomew's murder, about running through the desert, about Garrett saving them. He told about shooting Calhoun, about the nightmares after, about learning that violence sometimes necessary but never good, never clean, always costly. He told about choosing to speak again, about deciding to live instead of hiding in silence, about forgiveness and hope and the hard work of building peace. When he finished, the church was silent. Then Nell Coughlin stood, started clapping, slow, deliberate. Others joined. Silas, Mayor Boone, Miss Hartley. The applause spread like fire. Not celebration, recognition. Acknowledgement of pain shared and survived. Garrett felt tears on his cheeks. Didn't bother hiding them. Afterward, standing outside in afternoon sun, Tala approached. She placed her hand on Ashki's head, blessing in the gesture. "You walk between worlds, little one. Is hard path, lonely path, but important path." "I'm not alone," Ashki said. "I have Papa, have Mama, have you, have friends." Tala smiled. "This is true. You are lucky. Many who walk between worlds walk alone. You have tribe on both sides." She turned to Garrett. "You did good thing. Saving them. Building this. I was wrong to doubt. You were protecting your people. Can't fault you for that." "Maybe. But I also feared change. Feared what it meant if Apache and White could truly live together. Would mean my anger had no home. My grief had no target. Is easier to hate enemy than love neighbor. But you chose different. I chose what was necessary, what was true. The boy speaks truth. We bleed same, hurt same, heal same. The rest is just stories we tell ourselves to feel superior." She mounted her horse. Before leaving, she said one more thing. "More trouble comes, always more trouble. Men like those businessmen, they don't stop. But you built something here, alliance, community, foundation. That matters, that lasts even when we don't." She rode away. Garrett watched her go, thought about her words, about legacy and foundations and the long game of changing hearts. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, Garrett and Desba sat in the rocking chair he'd widened to hold them both. Ashki played nearby with 2 other children, one Apache, one White, their laughter mixing indistinguishable. "You think she's right?" Desba asked. "That more trouble comes?" "I know she's right. World doesn't change in 1 year. Hate doesn't die in 1 generation. We'll face more challenges, more threats, more people who want us gone. Then why stay? Why not take money and leave, start somewhere easier?" Garrett pulled her closer. "Because nowhere is easier. Hate exists everywhere. Fear exists everywhere. But here we've built something. Here people know our names, know our story. Here we have chance to show different way is possible. Even if it costs us everything. We've already lost everything once, both of us. Can't lose it twice, can only gain from here." Desba rested her head on his shoulder. "You are optimist, foolish optimist. And you're pessimist, practical pessimist. Together we balance." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep purple, watching stars emerge one by one, watching their son play without fear for the first time in his short life. This was victory, not perfect, not complete, but real. A year ago, Desba had run through the desert with death at her heels. Garrett had lived alone in his guilt. Ashki had been silent with trauma. Now they sat together, a family forged from impossible circumstances, bound by more than papers and necessity, bound by choice, by love. By the daily decision to stay when leaving would be easier. The businessman would return. Flynn's allies would seek revenge. The town's acceptance would waver and need constant reinforcement. But tonight, in this moment, they had peace. And peace, however temporary, was worth fighting for. "Tell me story," Ashki called from the garden. "About the stars. Desba smiled. Apache story or white story? Both, always both. So Garrett told the Greek myths Eleanor had taught him, and Desba told the Apache creation stories her grandmother had shared. And Ashki listened to both, weaving them together in his mind, building his own mythology from two worlds. This was the future. Not one culture dominating another, not separation and suspicion, but integration, mixing, creating something new from old pieces. Not perfect, never perfect, always complicated, always difficult, but possible. And possibility was all they needed. As darkness fell completely and the desert night sounds began, Garrett carried sleeping Ashki inside, tucked him into bed, kissed his forehead. "You did good today," he whispered. "Your father would be proud. Both of them." He returned to the porch. Desba waited there, watching the stars. "What you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking we are crazy, building life on land people want to take, raising child in town that barely accepts us, hoping world becomes better when history says it won't. And I'm thinking I wouldn't change any of it. This crazy, impossible life is ours. We built it. Nobody can take that." Garrett pulled her close. They stood together under stars that had witnessed countless human dramas, wars and peace, love and hate, birth and death, the eternal cycle. But tonight the stars witnessed something rare, something precious. Hope. Not blind hope, not naive hope, but the hardened, tested, battle-scarred hope of people who'd survived hell and chosen to believe in tomorrow anyway. They went inside, locked the door, checked the windows, old habits from dangerous times, necessary precautions in uncertain future, but they slept peacefully, together, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd faced everything else, together. And that made all the difference. Outside, the desert wind whispered through creosote and sage. The stars turned in their ancient dance. The world continued its indifferent rotation. But in one small ranch on the edge of civilization, three people who'd found each other in darkness dreamed of light. And in the morning, they'd wake and continue the work of living, of loving, of proving that different worlds could coexist in the same space. Not easily, not perfectly, but truly. And truth in the end was the only victory that mattered.